Good late afternoon. It's Joyful Christian Mystic Hermit. I really haven't done anything today much other than my grandson came a couple of days early because he was going to be busy and worked on my back and neck and gave me a couple of different additional exercises to try to stretch one to stretch my neck and the other one for the low back, keep that limbered, or as much as it can be. It's all fused, but stretches. And so I need to do all that. I just need to. I'm still struggling just to get going, to have energy. And I don't know if it's the heat or if the arachnoiditis is still just progressing along, I guess. And I did do some research and found out I was right. It is the leading cause of death of people with arachnoiditis. Suicide is the leading cause of death of people with arachnoiditis. They can also die, connected with that arachnoiditis, die because it affects the colon and the bladder eventually, and it can affect the kidneys. So you can get sepsis eventually if all of that gets bad enough and you don't catch it in time or something. And what was another cause? If you become paralyzed, which a lot of people do. That's why I just am trying to push myself beyond push, and I'm not doing well. Like I say, I've been in bed again today, other than when he came and taking the dogs out. And then we ran a quick errand. It's very, very hot out. So in fact, I had the air conditioning on, left my truck running. All the windows were down, except for the one that's stuck, and it's going to cost like $300 or $400 to get it to work right, and it's not worth it. I had 3 windows of the 4 down, and was parked right in front of the UPS drop-off store, 8 feet from the door, left it running, was getting out, giving them their treat, because they like a treat whenever I go in any place. And some lady was already with a friend, an old lady, of course, coming up at me and starting to scream at me. And her friend said, no, she's got her AC on, the windows are down. Come on. Younger woman pulled her off me. She wasn't on me, but she was in the attack mode and already screaming. And all I had to do was go in. I had my phone all ready with my little picture of my code for Amazon return. I had ordered some tennis shoes, and they had the size right on the order form, but they sent me 4 sizes too small. Not gonna fit these feet. But I got those in and out. Maybe it took me 20 seconds because I just walked up and I'm glad people are vigilant. And I'm sure her friend, said, nice that you care, but, good grief. You have to see the dogs in a vehicle that doesn't have windows down and no AC going, or even just windows down for that amount of time. But it was hot even driving there. I had the AC on and the windows down for all of us because it was very hot and my truck was hot. I've had to leave the windows shut because the truck's in the drive and the trash can's out in the street. But you just step out of my house and you smell the dead ducks and carp. I can't forget that smelly carp. So anyway, that was my outing and my little adventure with the public. But I thought, leave it to us old ladies. We can really be cranky. But I could see, I don't know what she thought. I had just pulled up and they were just coming. She didn't even have a chance to see for all she knew, I was just getting ready to pull out. And you can drive with your dogs places. People don't arrest you for having your dogs with you when it's hot outside and you're driving with your windows down. Well, I had both AC on and windows down, just trying to get air circulating. But just outside it's like so hot. So that's why I wait till 7 at night to even go out and start trying to do some work, and then stop maybe at 9:45 when it gets dark, too dark, or I'm worn out. Well, I'm worn out now, I have to admit. But anyway, that was our adventure for the day. And I'm going to start over with God bless the woman. I mean, I didn't say anything because thankfully her friend grabbed her right away and said, "Oh, stop." Her car's running, AC's on, windows are down. So, but the lady was still just yapping when her friend they were walking off. I thought, I don't know if it's friend, maybe it was her daughter. And then I had a call from mine, the one that speaks. And honestly, it's a mystery. So I've been trying to think about these different things I read, so I'm going to go through this because the last video was just sort of lost. I only got through 2 steps on the refusal to judge our neighbor by Dorotheos of Gaza. His discourse number 6, instruction number 6. And it's a very famous one on refusal to judge our neighbor. I can't judge that old lady because, if I had, well, I don't know what she thought. You usually get upset if you see a car and you see animals in it and they have no air and it's hot and the windows are up or just barely cracked, and the person hasn't been there and the dogs are in distress and you call the police or the shelter or something. But if somebody just pulls in, so I don't know. But it's good. I suppose some people are just very vigilant type people and looking for things, anticipating. And that's a good thing to be. Anticipate, I guess, but it just works perfectly with the slippery slope of judgment, which Dorotheus talks about, because it doesn't happen overnight. It develops in us, this tendency. And this lady's a good example. I don't know her name, so I think I'm safe using her as an example. A woman, an old woman, maybe younger than me though. I'm elderly. She was maybe 60, probably 15 years younger, or 10 years. Maybe she was 65. A young thing. So the first step was paying attention to minor curiosities. And what does it matter if I look at what she's doing? And she just had walked out of the UPS store because I was parked directly in front, just feet from the door. And so she was looking, curious, paying attention. What's this lady doing with her truck and her dogs? And the second step, accepting small suspicions against a person. So there were suspicions going on. What is that woman doing with her dogs in the car? So that's the second step of how judgment begins, a slippery slope. The result, the mind completely forgets its own sins and turns outward, leading to backbiting, pride, and total spiritual blindness. Well, now, this case today, just a couple hours ago, I don't know if that woman forgot her own sins. I have no idea. And she wasn't really, well, maybe a little bit leading to backbiting. I don't think. She was just on the alert. Oh, dogs in a car, dogs in a truck. You didn't really notice the details that it was okay, they weren't. And I suppose if we get to a certain point of assuming, see, it starts by assuming and accepting small suspicions against another person. We just assume things of other people, strangers even. And it can be family members, though. We can get into suspicions. And then we start accepting that this is how we think they are, or what they're up to, or what their reasons are for, calling or something, or calling but not wanting to talk. We can start wondering, well, what have I done, or have I upset the person? We start anticipating things, and then the result is that if we're the ones that are starting to nitpick on someone, we can start really forgetting our own sins, and we become backbiting or have spiritual blindness. That can happen either way. We can remember our own sins. We can turn inward and try to understand the other person or ourselves. Or we can also get into backbiting or pride, or have just a blindness about the situation and start analyzing. I tend to do that. And I don't know if it be called a judgment or just an analysis of concern, or just have to be careful with judgment, the slippery slope. Because we can't really anticipate how other people are viewing things, or how their day's going, why they act a certain way, or why they, like in a situation, why would they even call someone if they didn't want to talk at all, Well, so that leaves the person trying to figure out, and that's when you can get into trouble with analyzing and starting to have curiosity then. Oh, well, why is this person being this way? Or, see, it can go a couple of ways. This judgment can. We can start observing other people and judging and accepting our thoughts and our ideas or analysis as reality, when we can be totally wrong. Or somebody else causes something, an interaction, that we weren't even really thinking of them, and then we start thinking of them. Oh, well, what is this? What did we do? Or and then we can start wondering and come up then with suppositions, not necessarily maybe accusations, or it can be, but just wondering, well, what's this all about? Then we can start putting in our own ideas. That's when we get into trouble, trying to analyze in any way we have our relationships. It can be with strangers, it can be with family, it can be with whatever. It can be because we're observing something, or it can be that someone has done something with us, made a connection with us, and it's kind of off-putting or bizarre, and we're like, what is this, And then we start wondering and analyzing, and we can get judgmental that way in a certain way. So, in other words, it can be from us on other people, or from other people causing it in a kind of a reverse reaction from us, where we're trying to figure it out. We weren't doing anything, we weren't thinking, we weren't observing, but something enters into our life and it throws us off then. Well, what did we do? Why this animosity, or this sort of divisive or something, and we have to decide, and pray, how are we going to handle these things? Reproaching versus judging versus despising. So Dorotheus came down with these 3 ways, 3 distinct tiers of how he can help his disciples. And I don't know if I'm a disciple of his or not. I've come across a different desert father who I resonate with more than Dorotheus, which is another thing I wanted to bring out, is when I share these things, see, and I used to read a book and I'd get all gung-ho and think, oh, yes, this person really is wise, and I'm going to do all that he says and follow what he says. And then I'll read another book and realize, ooh, well, this one has a slightly different approach and other things that's taught. And, well, that's good too. I sort of like that. The main thing I think we need to keep in mind when we read, or if I'm sharing these things, is just to keep an open mind, to know we're really following Jesus and Scripture. That's number 1. And these other human beings over the centuries who had great growth spiritually through means that they devised for themselves. And they had followers, disciples, who wanted to learn the hermit life from them, or a spiritual holy way to be. And they would, learn from this person. Mostly, how to enact the Scriptures, basically, or the teachings of Christ. But the people themselves, the leader, the saint or whatever, the spiritual director, might have some other added lessons to teach that they found helpful to themselves, ways of being and doing, in order to come to some of the virtues that Jesus teaches. So, people want to hear those, admire the person who's successful in the spiritual life, and want to learn from that person and hear what they have to say. But I'm just saying, I'm recognizing it more than ever the older I get. You don't have to take somebody like a Dorotheos of Gaza, or even this other person I'm going to tell you about later on in another video, and just be their disciple. Take bits and pieces, or just appreciate, and then come up with your own based on Christ's teachings. do some, adapt to your own life, in other words. Ideas. Consider these ideas of how these different holy people, these different desert fathers and mothers, how they lived, well, how they chose to, and the tact they took. And a lot of times the trends would change. Because although I think this other one is an earlier one, but he differed. He wasn't as austere or as set. He's really, I think, more Christ-like in how he lived and lived his life. But they also said he was more psychologically in tune to others and had more of a psychological approach of understanding. So I think we have to pretty much understand Jesus and his path and his teachings. And then if we come across somebody who was very successful in applying in their own lives the teachings of Christ and came up with different ways of living and of examples, we can learn examples from him in the real world in another century, it reinforces our Christian lives, and it reinforces our walk with Christ, our following Christ. But if we get super caught up, I guess if you find somebody who's that close to your personality, because a lot of the ways that they come up with doing things, like Dorotheos of Gaza, he's more restrictive or austere, more austere, ascetic than others, and very defined and more rule-oriented in that way. And I'm more, I think, a little more of the understanding, and a lot of it has to do with my health. See, I have trouble just doing the exercises my grandson gave me at certain times. My body, I'm really ruled a lot by physical pain as far as when and what I can do on any given day. So, at any given time. So I have to be very flexible. And so something very routinized doesn't. And so my grandson doesn't expect me to be routinized. But he gives me these things, and they're not difficult. You can do them in bed and that kind of thing. He's made it very flexible for me because I've hired him as my personal trainer, my PT. So, but anyway, these are these levels of reproaching versus judging versus despising. And he did this to help his disciples. Dorotheus set this up, broke it down. The progression of negative thoughts. Because basically it ends up negative thoughts. This will be good for me because my 2 daughters accuse me of being negative. They accuse me. They judge me. And very negative. The one said to her sister I was the most negative person she'd ever been around. That was the one that was here for about 3 days or 4 days. Well, I was in the hospital for nearly 2 days. So maybe she was around me, I'd say a total of 4 or 5 hours all told. Because I was then home but medicated. And she was doing stuff with her sister and tried to clean up some of my mess and things. So she was busy. But I was in terrible pain after the knee replacement. So, and I sort of have to chuckle because I don't think anyone's just, and I was in terrible pain. And I found out the next day or the day she left, that I had been half medicated. So I was a little bit grumpy. I have to say, yes, I was, yeah, So, and I dare say, Who knows? Maybe she would be if she had been in my body. I don't know. I wouldn't say it. I wouldn't suppose that, but it's a possibility. Just laying that out. We just never know how we will be in somebody else's position in a circumstance like that. And I'd also just had the first big onslaught right before the surgery from the HOA men when they were on the attack 3 years ago. So that was on my mind. I was very upset by it. And their threats and things. So, yeah, I suppose I was negative. And I can be. I think that's one of my main weaknesses. I'm accepting it. I think it's best to accept reproaches. So, but this is for us to know how we treat other people. Dorotheus is teaching his disciples. And I'm considering myself a disciple right now, listening to what he has to say, what he taught. And I'm going through it the second time because I've read all his discourses before, but my pain brain has wiped the slate clean long since. So level is reproaching or to reproach. The action is simply stating a factual mistake or a single wrong act committed by someone. So you notice something they've done and you state the fact of what they did, the mistake, and the wrong they committed. Example, he told a lie. The next step level, that's when we start this habit of sort of meddling in other people. And I guess I could use what I was, the person who called, we'll take the one I don't know, the lady. She reproached me. She was yelling out, "You can't do this, look at your dogs," and about then her friend grabbed her right away, grabbed her by the arm and said, "Oh, stop, she's got her AC on, windows are down, you don't know what she's doing or how long," but she was reproaching me, stating a factual mistake, or a single wrong act committed by me. She just thought I was committing a wrong act. And it could have been, had I not been doing what I was doing to make up for the heat, and if I'd been going someplace for even 10 minutes in the heat or 5 minutes, I knew it was a walk in and walk out. But she didn't know. Judging, to condemn, passing a definite verdict on the state of a person's entire soul based on a single action. I guess we could use me as the example. She's negative. Or she acts negative. Then the next thing was she is negative. She's the most negative person I've ever been around. Then the next, despising or to belittle, treating the other person as completely worthless or inferior, or not wanting to be around them at all then, just cutting them off. Don't want to talk with her. Most negative person, So you take an action then, see? And in their example Dorotheus he is nothing compared to me. Well, we may not say that, but by our action against a person, we're saying basically that we're better. Now, in all fairness, sometimes there can be situations where it's best not to be around certain people. Just depends, you know. I've had to cut away from some people, and I couldn't say they were better than me, but we had different moral values, or we had a different way of being, different goals. You know, I have spiritual goals, and I try to work on it. And if someone does reproach me, or judge me, or even belittles me, or despises me as a result, I still try to change what perspective, or to really work on myself. And I'm a big believer in, if somebody sees something in you, even though they may have it be an extreme, there may be an element of truth in it. You need to discern it carefully. Really humble down. And I have found that I have negativity. Yes, indeed I do. So the next steps are, what do I do about it? How do I catch myself in it? Well, every day being a great day helps. Because I woke up this morning again very down. My mind, my body. Maybe it's the heat. I don't know. Or I overdid. But I was in bed I didn't even go out last night to do it. I planted one thing last night. One simple little thing. The hole was already pretty much there, but I thought. Then I had to get a lot of stones out and everything. So it took me a little longer, and I could barely stand up. My hip flexors were so painful, but I woke up and then I did that research on the suicide with arachnoiditis, and it said, the pain just gets so bad, and you're so limited, and you see yourself. I'm trying not to compare myself to even last fall when I was doing all the stonework. But just mentioning it, there's no comparison now, the pain level. And I'm on, my grandson mentioned, that the medicine of my patch, he had read up on it. He says, oh, that can make you extra fatigued. Or feel, more worn out or sedated or something. And a fatigue, but it's the pain. That's my thing. Because when it's cooler, I perk up more. So I think it's a combination of factors. But I think the bending and the gardening is not so good anymore. I don't know. And lifting that bag, my lumbar is on fire. Knife and fire. I read about a man who was burned in the subway in New York City. Pray for him. Well, it's been a while, but he's very disfigured from it. But a 19-year-old, well, he's an 18-year-old at the time, high school student from New York, burned him. It was a man sitting. He was asleep on a subway car by himself. A poor man, old man, and he lit him on fire. And they had a picture of it, just his lap and stuff, and his waist. And I thought of my spine, and I thought of these front hip flexors, and just how painful. And I thought, nothing compared to him being on fire, but close to. At times, I just about had to tell my grandson not to touch my lumbar. He was trying to, and he needed to though, so I didn't. I knew it was loosening it. But the pain. So, that can affect the mind. And I'm thinking of that man in New York with his disfigurement now. And the horror, the shock you would go into being put on fire and waking up. I guess they had a video. I didn't see the video. he stood up and just collapsed because the fire was just engulfing him by then. And but it took, I think, what was it, 2 minutes or 4 minutes? 4 minutes till they got to the next stop or something. And for the firemen, people on there called 911, and they were there very fast, police and stuff, to put the fire out. But he nearly died at just 4 minutes of being put on fire. So I'm thinking of him today and the pain, scar tissue and all from burns, and that's very painful for the rest of your life. So anyway, but see, there's a case. This high school student reproach, oh, disgusting old man, sleep on the subway, What a goof, what an old jerk, or whatever he thought of this poor man. And judged him, despised him, took an action against him. Nothing compared to me, I'm going to burn him. So that's where things can lead in our minds when we start the slippery slope of judgment. It can end in a mental action of thought, how superior we are, or that person's worthless, but it then can foment into a physical action. I'm not going to speak to that person anymore. I'm going to call, but I don't want to share anything of my life. I'm going to be in control. Because I don't really want to call. I'm just calling because I should, It's my duty. I'd better do it, And see, that all that kind of stuff, even those actions, those thoughts we have, and the outcome of it, and we probably tell ourselves, so the other person doesn't recognize, how I don't want to be talking. I don't want to call. I don't, if I can just get them to talk about something else, and then if they ask anything about me, I'll just get off the phone, because I don't really want to have a relationship much, I want to be in control. I don't want to give up any of what I'm doing in my life, because I don't really want to be a friend. See, we do these things, and we probably delude ourselves that other people don't even know, because we're so clever. When we do that, I'm trying to think of the times that I don't know, when I was sharing about the first priest or some of the others, I don't think I ever felt superior to them. I was disappointed because I thought, well, the first one, he was teaching me everything about the Catholic Church, and I made a wrong assumption, though, that he lived it all, see. I'm very naive that way. I get very excited. And I'd probably be just very disappointed if I found out that Dorotheos of Gaza didn't always live all his rules perfectly, I'm sure he didn't. None of us is perfect. He had his bad days too. But he was a far sight better than I am. I can guarantee you that. Because he's come up with all of this. Why judgment is strictly forbidden. This is good. Dorotheus gives 3 reasons why passing judgment harms the person doing it. And this is what we need to be concerned about. I do. Because even in my using other people as examples of judging, like the lady that just 2 hours ago, assuming that my dogs were going to be left in the car and with no coolant, no windows down, no water. I have their water bottle with me all the time. They never want to drink it. I don't know why. I could judge my dogs for that. We could judge anything, truly. And it is judgment. I like to call it analyze. It sounds better than judging, but I think I better call it judging or being critical analysis. No, it's critical judgment of others. And I do a lot of it. I have a lot of time to lay around and think. And that's dangerous too. What do I think about? See, I need to watch that. Be aware, analyze myself, and do a little critical judging. And just see, you don't want to take it too far with yourself. It's a bad habit. But be aware of what we're doing. I think he's trying to say this. So, how does it harm us when we do act like this? Make judgments or analyze others or situations. Analyze, i.e. judge. Usurp God's authority. God alone is the ultimate judge. He knows a person's upbringing, hidden struggles, inner temperament, and unique path. When we judge, we claim a right that belongs only to God. See, that's with my friend, my dear longtime friend, whose son is so ill. And I haven't heard how the doctor appointment went, but praise God, her niece came to visit with their 3 children, and her niece's husband is a doctor. And he went with my friend and Scott, her son, to his surgeon appointment this morning. So I'm praising God over that. But see, my friend was so worried about her son because he had turned against traditional churches based on what happened when he was a child and the hurt that he saw, the sin that he saw. But evidently it wasn't explained to him then and there. But see, I think that the mother was upset by it too. Well, we would be, but a lot of adults get upset and leave church, turn away from churches because of the sin in them. Well, there's people in them. We all sin. And if we recognize that and we realize Jesus Christ is the head of his church, so that part's perfect. But we people aren't, and we can't expect churches to be perfect then. As soon as you add people in, even though Jesus is the head of his church, the church on earth, Jesus is the head of it. When we add us into it, we taint it right then and there. So to leave, we're just a tainted person is leaving, and we're just stuck in our own taint then, But we don't recognize it because we've judged the people in the church, see. We've judged the church as being only the people there, when the church is also Christ. So we're really usurping God's authority if we worry about someone because they've turned away from a church. Or all churches, like they don't. Because God knows the person's upbringing, his hidden struggles, how old he was when he got hurt and saw the evil that these people did, not using the funds for this boy's extreme calling at a young age. He went to Mexico to the orphanage that they'd raised funds for, and he found out the church hadn't given those children the money, or the orphanage the money. They'd used it for something else back in their wealthy area, a wealthy church. And it crushed him. And he was probably maybe 12 years old at the most then. So he thought, well, he had a thing against organized religion. Traditional, they call it organized religion when they're angry at it. And it is an organization, a traditional church. in our times. And yes, we've added things in, humans have, because we're imperfect, that really probably shouldn't be in churches, you know. It's not as simple as the church Christ instituted. He had it very simple. And we've added to it. And then we misuse, we get so involved that we misuse it. But we can't judge someone, because I know that the mother's concerned. She knows that pancreatic cancer is very serious and aggressive. And he's been held off from treatment for now I think it's 5 weeks this week. And he still doesn't have treatment. He's just finally got an appointment. And Friday with the oncologist. And he's gotten so bad in this amount of time, really bad, Scott. I'll tell you later with this other idea. I bet I'll forget it. I read there's a saint for today. Maria Guadalupe is her name. She's a saint from Mexico. And she had many, many miracles of miraculous healings of impossible cases. And she in Mexico, is from Mexico, and she worked with the poor and the sick. And when she died, she continued these miracles. People would ask her to pray, ask her intercessions. Please ask this saint for a miracle for Scott, please. Maria Guadalupe is her name. Saint Maria Guadalupe. I think she lived in the 1800s and died in the early 1900s or something. Maybe I'll do a video on her to emphasize that. But anyway, so when we judge, when we think or worry even, when we worry about someone, we say, I'm just worrying about them. Well, it so easily moves into an assumption or a judgment. We're already assuming or anticipating when we worry that the person's not going to be with God because they turned against the traditional churches. But that's not the criteria for hell, is it? No. It's if you turn away from God and the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ. If you blaspheme. But Scott has, he's been very holy, helping the poor, and he still has teaching the students Spanish and helping the Mexican people, immigrants especially, and the poor. So, but see, it can happen so easily. It's because we care, yes. We can care so much that people who care a lot can be really judgmental. I know. I'm very compassionate. And I can get this is just hitting me great. This is good. Ignorance of repentance. We may see a brother commit a sin, but we cannot see the secret tears, deep regret, and internal repentance they offer to God afterward. So, that we just don't know what they've already done or how they're making up for what they did do. And so we got, it's just a reminder, stay out of it. Stop looking at other people. And I need this because I am a big observer. And I got this, it's just a recap of this chapter because I could, the whole thing, I don't have my book. It's boxed up. I have all my books boxed up and taped. And I don't have the energy even to go looking for it to reread that. So I found this recap of it. The law of reciprocity. By focusing on the sins of others, we lose the grace to fight our own. We're just so busy doing others, focusing on them, even with good intention, worrying about them for their own good. We don't want them to be bad or to, not have God in their lives or church or whatever. So God frequently abandons a judgmental person to their own weaknesses, causing them to fall into the exact same sins they condemned in others. Well, now I don't know for sure. This is Dorotheus thinks this, that God frequently abandons a judgmental person to their own faults, their own weaknesses. And I don't know if that's true. I don't think God abandons anyone, really. But he might have someone learn a lesson. That could be. I don't know. But we can cause someone to fall into the same exact sins that they condemned in others. Don't know. But I do know that if we focus on the sins of others, we do lose a lot of grace and energy to fight our own problems, our own sins. But I just don't know if God frequently abandons a judgmental person to their own faults. He might, I don't know. I'm not God, so I don't know. So we see in this even that Dorotheus maybe be a little off too. Might have gone a little extreme in that statement. Don't know. But he's doing his best trying to teach us, so I appreciate that. So the famous compass and circle analogy that Dorotheus had, to show how judging others cuts us off from God, Dorotheus introduces a brilliant geometric image. Imagine a circle drawn by a compass. God is the center point, and the straight lines or spokes running from the edge to the center are the lives of human beings. All these spokes going in like a wheel. The closer people travel toward the center, God, the closer they inevitably get to one another. The closer they get to one another in love, the closer they get to God. Conversely, turning away from your neighbor always means moving further away from God. Judging others breaks this oneness and forces a person into deep spiritual isolation. Those little diagrams, a circle with a compass, and then all the lines going out. And the lines toward the center are very close to one another, meaning God, if we have God as the center point. And if we're further away, it can be that that judging others can break the closeness with God. So I guess it's a good example. At this point, even with Dorotheus's diagrams and things, Mercy, I just lost my little spot. Honey, please, let me get to it. She wants me to pet her, massage her all the time here. Let me get to this part. I'm not sure. I think I'd have to draw the symbol, this compass and circus analogy. Well, I guess the further we are away from God, the spokes are further. If the spokes signify people, we can force ourselves away from people the more we are judging others. Well, and I think it happens. I think when we judge other people, they eventually pick up on it. Or other people around us do, definitely. Some of you have picked up on my judgmentalism in my little sharing, my negativity, my noticing things of others and remembering from my past negative stuff. So, and it causes people to drop away. Who wants to listen to it? Unless there's a good point of how, yes, I had to learn about the church. I had to learn, well, am I going to leave too? Because other people had left because of this first priest and other priests. Now the second priest, well, actually he's technically the third, the one who did the homilies against me, lies, and he detracted me and wrong. He detracted. It wasn't just judgment. He did judging, but it was wrong judgment. It was not even true what he was saying. All of the homilies for the weekend masses was about yours truly, because he wanted control over the soup kitchen. So he said lies, and he made up things about me, and he turned the entire parish away from me, other than the people who knew me, the people in the kitchen, the soup kitchen. But they were too scared to say anything to him. And the old neighbor man, who was so upset, but no one went in to tell him off, or to say how dare you, or try to dispel. But sure enough, some people left because of it, because they knew the truth. But there's this thing in the Catholic Church, somewhat in Protestant, but not as much, where but Catholic, you never dare say anything to a priest that, telling them that they were wrong to do something or whatever. But one person came to my house first thing the next morning, and it was an old neighbor of my mom and dad's. She wasn't that old, but and I'd lived there. It was during my high school years and college years. And I babysat for her children, her 5 children. And I did during the time period that her husband, who was a doctor, he got a brain tumor, and he died within about 6 months. And they had 5 children. And so I was babysat before and during and after. So, but I'd become Catholic as an adult, and so she knew me and her heart, and she knew what to do. And she drove up and she says, "You need a friend." And I said, "I sure do," because someone called me and told me, "Don't let your son go to church there this weekend." So he had to go to a different parish. And from then on, my spiritual father said, don't send him back there. He had to go to a different parish. And then my spiritual father told me, you're not to speak to that priest until he apologizes to you. Never, not to even say a word, and you're not to step foot on that property. That's what he ordered me. Until that man apologizes to you. He didn't even call him a priest. He says, until that man apologizes to you for what he's done. He says, I've never in all my years of priesthood have heard anything this terrible from the pulpit, So, but the man never did apologize to me, but he did speak to me finally. And I forgave him. I'd already forgiven him right away and I refinished a particularly difficult antique door as a prayer offering for him and for the forgiveness, an action to go with my forgiveness and for his soul, because he did do a very naughty thing. But my spiritual father told me, I was not to go into the soup kitchen ever again either. But I had my hermit vocation immediately. God arranged it all. I knew it, but it was painful. I cried a lot. It was sad. I love doing that soup kitchen. And God He'll take us out of things. He's in charge of our lives. And we just have to let go. And sometimes it's very painful. But in that case, my spiritual father cut me off from a situation and from people. Well, not from people in general, it's just the priest, but mainly the priest. And but it went on for 2 years, but then he spoke to me, and I lived right across the street from the church, so he was out, and had noticed I just put my energies into fixing up our old house that needed it, and he complimented me. I said, "Sure is looking nice," or something. I was doing some gardening in the front or something, and actually I'd planted 2 apple trees in the I don't forget what it's called. It's between the sidewalk and the street. It was an old street, so it had an area of ground, the sidewalk, and then a little bit of ground, and then the brick street. And I'd put 2 apple trees in my median, and they produced fruit. And kids walking from school, there's a grade school nearby, they'd get apples, and they'd be on the ground or low branch, and it was fun. It was unique, but no one pestered me about it. I don't think you could do that in just a regular subdivision. I had a different garden in a regular subdivision, and it didn't go down well. So some of the neighbors liked it, but the next door, of course, she was crazy, so who knows. But anyway, so judgment can cause a lot of damage, though, between people, and it causes distancing. It's a very negative thing, and if it's something that somebody's doing to us, it makes us wary. This situation, I'm wary. It's like, why call me? I wish the person wouldn't. Because it's sort of sad, It's not a natural kind of conversation. It's not a two-way of sharing or anything. So, but then I thought, well, what would these holy people, these desert fathers, do? I know what Abba Poman would do. He would take it with good heart and understanding. And Dorotheus would, say, don't judge the person and assume why they called or what. Understand something might be going on in their life, but everything in social media is just great. I think the person's having a great time, good, but I think it has to do with me, and that's okay. Pretty sure that's it. So I'll just accept it, and with a good heart to it, and turn it around. Immediately I thought, I can't let this get me down. I can't let it ruin my great day. It was great the person called. How nice. And I sent a message. What a lovely thing. Thank you for calling. How kind of you to call, So, or caring of you to call or something like that. So, turn the negatives into a positive, even for the other person. And sometimes it may be deceitful in a way to do that. I'm a real person with honesty. But in some cases, it's best we just stay positive and take all as a positive, even if it isn't. Why not, It's better than getting down, and then we start judging more, and sometimes then take it worse than what it was. So, practical remedy. Let's see what Dorotheus says to do. If the enemy shows you a fault in your neighbor, This is back to us. If we see a fault in someone, Dorotheus instructs you to immediately cast it out. Replace, well, see, I guess I could use that example of the phone call. Just cast it out, you know. And other than the fact that it was nice that the person bothered, you know, took the time, made the effort. Even if, you know, it wasn't like calling a friend and that would be an enjoyable person that the person wanted to call, you know. Put it all out of mind, cast it out, replace it with the remembrance of that neighbor's good qualities. Oh my goodness, there's so many. Oh my. And remind yourself, I have no authority to judge, and I have plenty of my own sins to weep over. How many times have I somebody's called me, or I've called someone and didn't really want to. Thought, well, I'd better, you know. It's the right thing to do. Or this is a good example on me. There was somebody who honestly was very tedious, and it was hard. And most of the time doesn't put the hearing aids in, so you're shouting. And but you know, we become great friends. And the person came just yesterday. I think it was yesterday, or the day before. I think I was in bed both days. So I was in bed, and we had just a great great conversation, spiritual into it. And I realized after I'd shared something that she couldn't hear a word because I'd forgotten to shout. And I had to sort of laugh to myself. It didn't matter at all. And when I thought back, she didn't need to hear anything I had to say. Who, you know, wasn't going to change her life that much. So she would have found it interesting maybe, and maybe increased her faith some, but otherwise, no, you know, she can live and die without it easily. But the other things, the things that she shared were important. And the idea we came up with, she's going to write a novena for us for someone that we both love and care for and are concerned about. So she'll bring that over in a couple of days and see how it worked out. Because I made myself stop being bothered and judgmental of little things, you know, letting little things get to me. And it's much better now when the person comes here, because she won me over and I just can't sit. It was and tile floors and sitting, even though they were wood chairs. And that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, at least. 2 and 3. So, and I've gotten so much worse. So, and they're so thoughtful. In fact, I went on. She did hear that. I was shouting it. Just how Christian they are. And they're Catholic. And I said, you know, you just are so caring and put it into action. If I need something, she loves to do things for me. And because she wants to have something to do. So she's going to go to the grocery. I think I have to get her my list by Friday. So, you know, just see how things change when we do cast other things out and forget about it, you know. It opens up to the good of a relationship, of how good a relationship can be. If you remove the things that are irritants, they might even be, you know, idiosyncrasies, or that can be a nice way of putting irritants, things that you could easily judge someone about. It can be idiosyncrasies. Like people could really, with me, how I go off topic. And that would be justifiable, trust me. But it's an idiosyncrasy, obviously. I'm aware of it. I haven't had success of stopping it. But anyway, I'm trying. I would, I should try harder. So there's another one of Dorotheos's instructions, number 7, that I'm going to describe to you, but I'm going to do it in a different video. Keep them a little shorter, but it's on self-accusation. That's the instruction number 7. Why we want the good of self-accusation. And taking other people's accusations, I think, and examining them. When we are judged, it's a good thing. Like I could say, why does this person not want to share their life? Share aspects of it with me? Well, probably because I might worry about it or ask questions or make her feel like I'm too involved in her life. And she wants more freedom. One time somebody said to me that they had read something that was she thought it was right on, that a woman is not really freed to live her own life until her mother has died. I think I was about 53 or maybe 55 at the time, probably 55 or 56 years old. And it was like, oh, well, I said, oh, yeah, that's interesting. I said, maybe. I said, I don't feel that way with my mother. My mother had just passed maybe 2 years prior. So I would have been 55. And I said, I don't feel that way at all. But I said I could see where some might, or it's a possibility for people. And maybe in some ways, if you're just thinking temporally, I went to be with my mother nearly every day, except when I was having pain sieges. I would spend hours with her. I promised my dad the night I was with him before he died. In the middle of the night, I said, Dad, don't worry about Mom. Let go. You can let go. Because I could tell he was trying to stay from her, I said, I'll be with her when her time comes. I'll be with her like I'm with you right now. I promise that. Don't worry. And I made good on that promise as best I could, other than my pain sieges. And it wasn't easy, but toward the end, Mom made a huge breakthrough. And, she didn't want to die. She wasn't happy. She was angry. So that's not so easy. It's understandable. But, and we would hope that a parent could, be accepting right away. But her disease came on suddenly, and it was one that who could figure how she even got it. And it was horribly painful. Pulmonary fibrosis, and she was never a smoker, so lungs. But she had a big turnaround. Oh, Easter was one big one, came back to Christianity, and she died in October 12th, and then during the summer, by about August or end of August, she had major breakthrough with acceptance and became I think it was the Psalms, reading the Psalms aloud. I would take my breviary and read it, and she started getting interested. What's that you're reading? And, well, she thought it was some Catholic thing. I said, well, it's scriptures. And she says, well, what's the other parts that you're reading? I said, well, it's just writings, really good writings by holy people, people who lived and wrote beautiful thoughts, spiritual thoughts, and devotions and things. Some poetry in the back and songs, hymns, and she says, well, you can read me the scripture part, only the scripture part. So I would read that to her. And then, well, at first it was nothing. And then she says, well, go ahead and read me the scripture part. Because her eyes had failed. She couldn't read. So I did that. And toward the end, she says, well, go ahead and read the other part too. And she got trust that, Catholic wasn't scary. And non-Christian, see. A lot of people think Catholicism's not Christian. they don't go back before 1526, see, and realize Christ's church from the very beginning has always been. And they started calling it Catholic. Other people did in the 2nd century. That's how it got its name, Catholic. They really need to change it back to Christian, because they were Christian for the first century and a half or so, and then non-Christians started calling them Catholic. And a pope says, just accept this, accept this. See, he was trying to say, don't let the wrong judgment, the name calling, or they didn't want to use the name Christ. These other people didn't, so they came up with Catholic. And he says, just accept it. We don't want fighting over it or wars over it or anything. And so it just stuck then. And too bad, because then when they had the schism, the Protestant Reformation, they had a schism between the East and the West, which I think was reasonable because of such a difference in cultures. At that time period it was. Now I think it would be great to... In fact, I love the East and the West. I enjoy the Eastern saints and everything. It doesn't bother me. I'm not, but back in the 1030, was it the schism was, or somewhere in that time period, the cultures were so different. I think that lent to it a lot. And they each wanted to have their own pope, and had a fuss over that. So, whatever. Human beings. We're all sinners, and that wasn't necessarily a sin. Sort of made sense, I think. But now we're such a world community now with internet and everything. But so just interesting how things are, but we make progress, we keep going, and I just never thought that I wasn't really free to live my life. I had more freedom, yes, after my mother died. I felt sort of lost. That was a real purpose for me and a mission, to go every single day that I wasn't in a pain siege. So I was so much better off then too. I'd drive like a half hour even. I had a decent car finally that had good shocks, and so yeah, I definitely was more free, but I missed my mother. I realized I lost my best friend, the one who would always be there for me, who, no matter what I did, she'd still love me, so it was hard. But I'm with her, she's with me, and I haven't seen her in visions or dreams, but I did a couple of times, but maybe 3 times, and had a miracle happen another time with her, a major miracle with her, trying to reach and reassure me when I was having a terrible pain siege, one of the spinal headache ones that I don't have anymore. So, and I haven't seen my dad again either, but he gave me what I was to do, and three messages, and I don't think I'm using my head yet, but That was one of them. Start using your head. So I don't think my gardens are using my head. Not now. They're catching up with me. But I thought, even if worst comes to worst, in the fall it'll cool down and I can get the stuff planted then. Just leave it to faith. But in the meantime, I got to keep myself moving. So, all right. That's Dorotheus of Gaza. That whole section, number 6, on why about not judging our neighbor, why we shouldn't, other people, in other words, anyone. See, I shouldn't judge in reverse the woman that was starting to yell at me about having the dogs in my truck. Before she even knew anything, She just jumped to the conclusion. But see, then I judged her for it. So it gets very complex, I think the basic rule that he says is essentially just leave other people's business to themselves. Even when they are coming after us, just leave it and stay to our own lives, our own, not to ignore people, but if it's a situation that is contentious or questionable, if we don't understand, or if somebody's angry or seems to be, just leave it, Don't analyze, because we don't know for sure in many situations what the other person's going through, or why they assumed, or they might just be a very judgmental person. They haven't read Dorotheos of Gaza yet, or Jesus or something. Or they're just by nature more analytical, more judgmental, more critical, which is part of my problem. And it can be a good thing, you can tell yourself. I used to have to do critical analysis of things. When I was in the school districts in Southern California, in quasi-administrative positions, I would go around do school reviews with a team. And the whole thing was judging and criticizing, and coming up with things that they needed to improve in. Things that they were doing well, that's critical judgment also. And things they weren't doing so well, and give suggestions on how they could improve. But it was judging all the same. And that kind of judging, that's why I think we should accept judgments. If other people want to judge us, because we can always find something to benefit or to learn and grow from. And it could be what you find out, that person's very critical of me. And so take a lot of what they say with a grain of salt, if it's a constant kind of a thing. If they don't like you, or if something has bothered them, and so they react that way with you. But it doesn't mean to drop them. Just learn to understand that part of them and not judge them for it. Let God help them see that they're very judgmental. Unless at some point God gives you the opportunity, or I have to say God tells you you need to say something. That's what he did, with the one priest, the priest that was grooming some boys. I kept my eye on everything, sometimes day and night. And my dad let me know at Mass, time now to straighten it out. Time, you have to go in and straighten it out. He just said that to me at a Sunday evening Mass. No, it was a Sunday noon Mass, and I told the rector at the end, back in the back when everybody else was out, I said, I need to talk with you. Need an appointment. It's important. It needs to be soon. So he set it up, and He sort of wanted to know. I said, no, I says, I've got to bring things to clarify who I am, because they were confused. They thought there were two of me. So I needed them to know there was just one and that I was okay, because they had a lot of negative judgments of me, because I'm different and people can go after different types. See, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of person you are. There's always going to be people out there who will judge, who will criticize, and be uncomfortable. And just have to accept and accommodate and work around it. Then, I don't care generally, but in that case, my dad told me I needed to clear everything up. And I knew what he meant. I had to make sure that they knew I wasn't this goofy, weird, awful nutcase person that they thought. But they had in their minds thought there were two people, one the bad me and one the good, with two people with the same name. And, and they even had picked out a person who did have a reputation for being a little goofy, who didn't look at all like me, but thought that was the other one with my name. And she's a very sweet, she's a saint, actually. But she does look bizarre, and she got a little carried away with miracles, any kind of a miracle. Even if it wasn't a miracle, if it was a false one, some kind of a false vision thing that people were getting all psyched out about. she would get really wigged out over it and stuff. And, it's just, I'm not judging her. That's just a fact. Dorotheus doesn't really go through discerning fact from judgment. And I don't mean it negatively. I thought it was amazing when I realized they had her with my name to represent the bad of all the complaints they'd had from parishioners about me being this awful person, and strange, and just, and they made up stuff too about me. And so it was amazing. And so you have to really learn to detach from yourself. Dorotheos of Gaza gets to that eventually also, just dying to self. That's the main way, he says, to handle matters and to grow spiritually. First, you have to really die to yourself and basically not care what people are saying about you. Except for true things, legitimate corrections and judgments are gold to us, to be appreciated. And when we can figure out why someone withholds or something, then respect that and don't trigger it. That's what I think. Dorotheus didn't say that, but I do, I think Abba Pullman would react that way. That's how Jesus would handle it, with compassion, understanding, and don't expect other of the person. Leave it all to faith and leave how they want to be to them and respect it for them. And if we've died to ourselves, we won't be all hurt or upset or tied up in a wad over it. It's okay. And still love. But avoid triggering anything that would get them into retreat mode or something. Just stay clear of that. Do it how they want it. Let them have the control. That's how you handle people who want control. You let them have the control. Because we've died to ourselves and it doesn't matter. And if it's fact that like to have their control over what they want to say or share or whatever. And they want it a certain way. They want to know about you, but they don't want they don't want a back and forth friendship, in other words. So, do you have other friendships? Sure. Enjoy those, And you can always have more. I don't. I mean, I'm not out there, but I consider everyone a friend, but I can't physically do it even. So, and it's this when this neighbor is busy with family or something, or I don't hear from her for quite a while, it's okay. I'm so worried. I don't feel like, oh, I used to be this. Well, what have I done wrong or whatever. Well, that gets into judging yourself then. Too much self. So you die to yourself and you leave it all to faith. And things don't get to you that much. I still have stuff that gets to me because I haven't left it all to faith, but I'm working on it. And I'm going to work on not judging, not criticizing, it's noticing all these details and observations of people. And it really precludes us from a closer relationship with God. We're just busy about many things that way. Many observations, many people's personalities or idiosyncrasies, all clogged up in our minds. And we'll just let it go, they say, that's what he's saying. Stop the noticing, the curiosity. That's the start of it. The thinking about people or the noticing every little thing. Watching. Like my buddy next door. He watches me. And I've learned just to ignore it. Every now and then, if I'm bending over, I get a little, I think, oh my gosh, he's watching me. But I think, oh well, let him enjoy, pervert. So if an old lady's rear gets him excited, good. I get, turn it into a positive. So, let it go. Let God deal with all these things. And see, God's showing me, I'm declining, and He's showing me just how amazing it is. And it can get scary at times. I get sort of freaked at times with, oh my, this is really happening. But what can you do but leave it to faith? Really, God gives us the opportunity. He helps us die to ourselves. And we lose our independent, I used to think, that I could sort of tell with the woman who, she's very pleased with her. She's 13 years older, and or 12 and a half years older, and she's run circles around me. And I think I sort of was like, well, no, I can do my grocery shopping. But I realized when she asked that I hate going. I don't like walking on the concrete floor. I'm tired. It takes energy. And I'd rather have energy for other things. So I thought, what a blessing. It just changed my outlook from judging or even noticing might have been a little bit of truth to it, and letting her have it. Having something to do and feel good. Why not? That's love. Instead of judging or analyzing what she wanted or was thinking or feeling see, it's just so much easier this way. And I wish I'd I mean, I've read Dorothy's, but I think you also, when you read things, at the time, it probably really, really helped me with where I was then. Now I'm in a different place, and it helps me more because I'm letting go and leaving more and more to faith. So it's all very helpful. Hope it is to you too. God bless his real presence in us, the Trinity within us. God bless them.